Rain fell in a fine mist, tiny droplets, like strands of thread, stretched across the night too light to soak a coat, yet just enough to make everything outside feel cold and slick. On this Monday night, Highway 83 was strangely empty. No honking, no headlights in the rearview, only a faded silver Honda Accord, quietly pulling into a desolate roadside gas station. Monica Taylor turned off the engine and exhaled deeply. Her chest rose and fell gently beneath the creased blouse she'd worn for 12 straight hours. In the air, her legs felt like lead, as though each step defied gravity itself. On her chest, the ID badge from Riverside General Hospital swayed slightly as she leaned over to open the door. In the back seat, her 10-year-old son Caleb was quietly absorbed in his tablet screen, the blue light casting soft shadows on his small face. He wore an oversized gray hoodie, hands tucked into the pocket, a cloth mask hanging loosely under his china habit since his first asthma attack at age 4. Beside him, his inhaler rested silently, like a soldier standing guard. Monica tapped gently on the window. "I'm going in for a bottle of water." "Just 2 minutes, okay?" Caleb didn't look up, but nodded and replied softly. "I'm practicing my spelling." Monica offered a tired smile. "Good boy." Locked the doors, she gave the car hood a light pat and walked away, her small figure swallowed by the darkness and the dim yellow glow from the aging street lamps above. There was only one other vehicle at the station, a police cruiser parked near the air pump, lights off with 2 white officers inside. Monica noticed them briefly, but paid no mind. She had no reason to worry. She was a nurse, just off her shift, with a legal vehicle and proper documents. This was just another night, wasn't it? And yet, something in the air felt wrong. Not cold but hollow, as if the very space around her had paused to hold its breath. Inside the cruiser, Officer Grant Wallace, early 40s, sun-reddened face, square jaw, sipped from a cup of cold coffee. Beside him, Officer Kyle Benson, younger, head shaved, cracked his knuckles nervously. Again and again. "Look at that," Benson muttered, nodding toward Monica. "Late model car, custom rims, wearing scrubs. You really think that's her ride?" Wallace gave a dry, humorless chuckle. "No way. Probably borrowed or stolen." "Let's find out." They stepped out unhurried, relaxed, moving with the confidence of men who believed they were always right, always in control. Monica noticed them as she reached for the gas pump. Instinct made her stand straighter, shoulders squared, spine stiffening. One hand held the nozzle, the other hovered near her hip, close to the pocket with her wallet and ID. "Good evening," she said evenly, her smile polite but tight. Wallace spoke first. "This your car?" His eyes didn't meet hers. They swept across her chest, her hospital badge, her hands, her shoes, scanning, searching for something, anything out of place. "Yes," Monica replied, voice steady. "I bought it last month. Papers are in order, tags are current." She pulled out her wallet, handed him her ID and registration. Wallace took them, but didn't look. "You work at Riverside Hospital?" "Yes. I'm on the night shift. I'm a nurse." Wallace tilted his head, squinting. "Huh. Doesn't really look like someone who drives a car like this." Monica said nothing. 1 beat. 2. It wasn't the first time she'd heard that line, not from a cop, but from a grocery store guard, a delivery guy, strange men on the street. Always that same implication, not crude, not direct, but laced with the quiet denial of who she was. In the car, Caleb was beginning to sense the change. His mother no longer moved freely. Her voice had slowed. Her shoulders were tense. Her grip on the gas pump had turned into something desperate, like she needed it to anchor herself. And Caleb knew something was wrong. He pulled out his phone, hands trembling slightly, and typed quickly, "Mom's in trouble. To cops. Gas station off 83. Come now. Recipient, Uncle Nate." He hit send. Then he swiped to the voice recorder app and began recording. He slipped the phone inside his hoodie, near his chest. A soft red light blinked, recording. Monica didn't know. All she knew was that the pretense was gone. Benson walked to the back of the car, leaned down to inspect the plates, like he was checking. Wallace remained in front of her, unmoving, unblinking, watching her, as though waiting for an excuse to escalate. In that moment, Monica recognized the expression one she'd seen too many times in the air. The look victims described with 2 words, power and predation. But tonight, she was not the one doing the saving. She was the one being marked. A breeze swept across the empty concrete of the gas station, rustling a paper sign taped to the convenience store window. Monica glanced at it. Her heart sank. CCTV temporarily out of service under maintenance. And in that instant, she knew she was alone. The dim yellow light from the gas station cast a hazy glow across Monica's face, highlighting the weariness at the corners of her eyes and the dark circles beneath them. She stood upright, hands still gripping the gas pump nozzle, a gesture that now felt less like routine and more like instinctual self-defense. Inside her, a vague unease was rising like an underwater swell. No cameras, no witnesses, and the 2 men showed no sign of leaving. "Is there anything in the car we should know about?" Wallace asked. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the thick weight of threat. Monica didn't answer right away. She took a deep breath, steadying her voice the way she had hundreds of times, with panicked patience. "My son is in the car. He's 10, doing homework. There's nothing else." "Your son," Benson repeated, circling around to the other side of the car. He leaned toward the passenger window, hand raised to block the reflection so he could see more clearly. Inside, Caleb froze. He didn't move, eyes fixed on the phone that continued recording in silence. His right hand hovered near his inhaler but didn't touch it. He knew, if he looked nervous, they'd say he was hiding something. If he spoke up, they'd say he was being disrespectful. Caleb had lived long enough in this world to understand. His skin color alone was reason enough to be suspect. "That kid looks older than 10, Benson said loudly, as if daring Monica to react. "You sure he's really your kid?" Monica clenched her jaw. Her smile was gone. Her eyes shifted from calm to vigilant. "I'd appreciate it if you didn't try to scare my son." Wallace tilted his head, lips curling. "Oh, you're worried about the boy? Then what kind of mother brings him out this late, in the rain, all alone?" His tone dripped with mock concern, thinly veiled contempt. Monica wanted to scream, but she knew screaming would be giving them exactly what they were baiting her for. She had seen too many patients in the arrive with resisting arrest injuries, wrapped in medical lies and silence. She was a healer, but tonight, she would have to survive. "I'd like my documents back," she said clearly, her gaze unwavering. "I've complied fully. You have no reason to hold them." Wallace didn't respond. He kept the papers in hand, but his eyes stayed locked on her face, waiting for any flicker of blink, a shift that might justify escalation. The air between them thickened, like the weight of the sky was pressing down on all 3 of them. "You getting smart with the police, nurse?" Wallace growled, then casually dropped the documents. They hit the wet concrete with a smack, the plastic ID case sliding out and landing face down in a puddle. Monica bent down to retrieve them. Her knees trembled, but her hands remained steady. "I'm speaking as a citizen," she said. "I've broken no laws. I'm pumping gas, and I'm leaving." Benson stepped back toward the driver's side. "Or maybe you're hiding something. I've seen you glance back at the car 3 times. That nervous, huh? My son is in the car." Monica replied, standing up straighter. "He's scared." "You're scaring him." Benson furrowed his brow, then asked something that made Monica's blood run cold. "You sure the kid isn't faking it? Kids these days good actors. Fake coughs, fake wheezing just so mom can get away." This time, Monica couldn't hide her reaction. "Don't talk about my son like that," she said, her voice tightening like a drawstring pulled to the throat. "He has asthma, and he's in that car, panicking, because of you." Inside, Caleb could feel the tightening in his chest. It wasn't the air, it was the tension. Breath became harder, the air felt thinner. His chest constricted, sweat beaded under the thick hoodie. His hand shook as he reached for the inhaler, but his fingers slipped off the trigger. Once, Then twice. He began to cough. Monica heard it. A muffled, choking cough from the back seat. She spun around, hand diving into her scrub pocket for her phone, tapping her contact list. Her thumb hovered over a name she'd promised to only call when things became uncontrollable. Nathaniel Carter, Caleb's uncle, the city's mayor. Before she could press call, Wallace lunged. He slapped the phone from her hand. It flew across the asphalt, skidding through a puddle and landing near the rear tire. "No one makes a call while we're talking," Wallace barked. Monica instinctively stepped forward. "That's my personal property," she shouted, fury blazing down her spine. And then Wallace's hand slammed into her shoulder, shoving her backward into the side of the car. At the same time, Benson grabbed her wrist and twisted it behind her back. "You're resisting. Don't move," he snapped, ignoring the gasp of pain from Monica's throat. From inside the car, Caleb's voice trembled through the glass. "Mom, I can't breathe." The words tore through the night. Like a blade, Monica struggled, but they held her firm. Her eyes locked on Caleb, her son curled in the seat, clutching his chest, reaching weakly for the inhaler. "He's faking," Wallace yelled. Without hesitation, he flung the car door open and knocked the inhaler from Caleb's hand. Monica's scream echoed through the station, a scream not just of pain, but of a mother watching her child's life endangered, powerless to stop it. The moment the inhaler flew from Caleb's hand, time seemed to freeze. There was no more sound of rain on the metal roof, no distant echoes of car horns, only the faint, strained wheeze coming from the boy's chest as he desperately tried to breathe. Though the air had nowhere to go, Caleb curled in his seat, fingers gripping the edges of the cushion, eyes wide and locked on his mother, not pleading, but drowning in pure fear. Fear that he might not make it. Fear that the searing pain in his chest wouldn't stop. With every ounce of strength a mother could summon in a moment of life and death, Monica broke free from Benson's grip in a single sharp motion. Her soaked nursing shoes slipped slightly on the wet cement, but she reached the back seat. She dove down, snatched the inhaler lying by her foot, and pressed it into her son's trembling hands. "Push it down, Caleb. Press hard. Breathe, baby, breathe deep." His tiny fingers clutched the device. A soft click sounded, then a burst of compressed air. Caleb inhaled deeply, fast, painful, desperate. Monica knelt beside him, one arm wrapped around his shoulders, patting his back gently, whispering silent prayers into the night. His breath began to slow, still raspy, but steady. He was alive. And that was when Monica cried. Not from pain, but from a primal terror she had never known. The helplessness of watching her child nearly be robbed of the most basic human right, the right to breathe. She turned back. Tears streaked her cheeks, but her eyes now burned like blades. "You didn't just abuse your power. You almost killed my son." Behind her, Benson yanked her back roughly. "You resisted. You just earned yourself a real charge, nurse. You're teaching that boy to disrespect the police." Wallace snarled, slamming the car door shut. 10 years old and already pulling tricks, filming, faking an attack so his mother can walk free. "You to think you're above the law." Inside the car, Caleb leaned toward the window, gasping through broken breaths, and shouted, "You're wrong. My mom didn't do anything. You're the ones doing wrong." The crismal, trembling, but piercing it through the night like a blade through fabric. Monica, face pressed against the cold car frame, wrists still wrenched behind her, couldn't move. Inside the car, Caleb focused all his remaining strength on keeping the recording going. Every move now cost him. He wasn't just fighting asthma. He was fighting to protect proof. The phone stayed secured to his chest with the strap of his face mask. The red light beneath his hoodie blinked softly, still recording. He remembered what Uncle Nathaniel had told him months ago. If something bad happens, you don't have to scream, don't fight. Just record. Hold the truth. That's how you stay powerful with the evidence. Back then, Caleb had just nodded. But now, those words were his anchor. Benson pressed Monica's arms tighter. The handcuffs were already out. But Wallace wasn't done. He stepped forward, eyes no longer hiding his hate. "Who do you think you are?" he hissed. "A black woman driving a nice car, working a decent job, walking around in scrubs? You think that makes you above being checked?" Above the law, Monica was no longer just a mother trying to protect her son. She now saw these men clearly not as peacekeepers, but as enforcers of a system meant to remind her of her place. They weren't here to serve. They were here to dominate. "You just said it," she replied, voice low but deliberate, every word carved from steel. "And I'm remembering every syllable. Who you threatening, huh?" Benson spat to the side. "You're not a lawyer, not a prosecutor. You're just some single mom driving a Honda." "What made you think?" Then tires screeched. A sharp, violent scrape of rubber against wet pavement echoed like thunder. A sleek black SUV tore into the gas station lot and halted with a cinematic stop, right at the center of chaos. Wallace's hand shot to his belt. Benson shifted stance, trembling fingers hovering near his taser. Monica instinctively threw herself over Caleb, shielding his body with hers. The car door opened. Out stepped a tall man in a tailored black suit, simple, clean-cut, and powerful. He didn't storm out. He didn't shout. He radiated presence, cold, unwavering, still. He walked calmly forward, stopping a few paces from Wallace. From his inner pocket, he drew a slim leather wallet and flipped it open. Under the harsh gas station light, the golden badge shimmered. "Mayor Nathaniel Carter, office of the mayor." His voice followed, deep, calm, resounding like a judge's gavel. "Take your hands off my sister, right now." Silence. Even the sign on the door, "CCTV temporarily out of order," seemed to stop fluttering. Wallace hesitated. Benson looked from the mayor to Caleb, the boy still struggling for breath, but eyes locked fiercely on his uncle. Monica lifted her head. She had never seen Nathaniel like this. Not the smiling brother at family dinners, not the mayor shaking hands on television. This was something else. A man standing in the shadows, wielding justice and quiet fury. And she knew tonight, silence had been shattered. In the stunned silence that followed Nathaniel Carter's unexpected arrival, the headlights from the black SUV still beamed directly at the two officers, illuminating every raindrop on their uniforms. Every flicker of shock etched across their faces. That light didn't just pierce the darkness of the gas station, it stripped away the hollow authority they had used to dominate an innocent woman and a boy not yet 12. Monica held Caleb in her arms, her trembling hands still pressed to his shoulder, afraid that if she let go, everything would collapse again. But for the first time in what felt like endless minutes, she saw a glimmer of hope, not from the headlights, but from Nathaniel's presence. "The mayor," Wallace stammered, half question, half disbelief. His hand hovered near his belt, close to the holstered gun. "Yes," Nathaniel replied, his voice low and sharp, like a blade drawn cleanly from its sheath. "And she's my sister." No one spoke. Even the wind had stilled. Nathaniel stepped forward, raising his badge to eye level, then lowering his voice, not to calm, but to make every word land like a chisel carving into stone. "You just violated multiple laws. You laid hands on an unarmed civilian. You obstructed medical access. And worst of all, you endangered the life of a child." Wallace clenched his fists. She resisted. The kid was overreacting. Nathaniel's eyes locked onto his, ice cold and unflinching. "She was surviving, and you were violating basic human rights." A soft sound broke the stillness, a police siren hastily cut off. Two patrol cars emerged from the far end of the street, silent and steady like a ceremonial procession. Their doors opened. Four uniformed officers from the River Hill district stepped out, faces grim, offering no greetings. One of FEMA lieutenants walked straight to Nathaniel and gave a firm nod. "Mr. Mayor, we received direct orders from headquarters, ready to carry them out." Nathaniel pointed at Wallace and Benson. "Disarm them. Immediate suspension from duty. Both are under internal investigation." Wallace flushed purple with rage. "What? You can't take his word just because he's the mayor. He's her brother." The lieutenant didn't respond, but two younger officers stepped forward, slipped on rubber gloves. and unfastened the gun belts from Wallace and Benson. The gesture efficient. Professional carried the weight of 1,000 words. Power was being stripped away, piece by piece. Inside Monica, a storm of emotions churned. She couldn't stop shaking it from cold, but from the sheer magnitude of what had just unfolded. It had all happened in under 30 minutes. But in every second, she had felt the pressure of a life Timiofa's system that sat heavy on her shoulders subtle now. Now, someone stood in front of her, and justice, at long last, had a name and a face. She pulled Caleb closer. He was still wheezing, but his eyes had lit up to him. The man standing there wasn't just Uncle Nathaniel. He was someone who had kept his promise. Nathaniel turned to her, his gaze softening. He stepped forward and gently touched her shoulder. "You okay?" Monica didn't answer immediately. She only nodded slightly. But her tearful eyes said everything. She was no longer alone. At that moment, an ambulance from Riverside screeched into the lot, its red lights spinning like a racing heartbeat. Two EMS, a short-haired woman with razor-sharp eyes and a quick, steady stritters toward Monica and Caleb. "The boy has a history of asthma. He just had a severe attack," Monica reported, her nurse's voice snapping back into place with instinctual clarity. The EMT nodded. "We need to take both of you in. Your blood pressure's spiking. You and your son both need observation." Nathaniel knelt beside her, taking Monica's hand in his. "I'm going with you. No one else touches you. Do you hear me?" This time, she deadly nodded. Caleb was lifted onto the stretcher, an oxygen mask secured over his face. His hand reached out blindly. Monica grabbed it and didn't let go. Before the ambulance doors closed, Nathaniel leaned down and whispered into his nephew's ear, "You saved your mother tonight. I'm proud of you." Caleb didn't speak. He only nodded, his fingers still gripping the phone where the red recording light continued to blink. One piece of evidence, one undeniable truth. As the ambulance pulled away from the gas station, Monica looked back through the rain-specked window. In the hazy glow, she saw Wallace in handcuffs screaming at no one. Benson sat slumped on the curb, head in his hands, and Nathaniel remained there, tall and immovable, a monument to the night things changed. For the first time in Monica's life, she saw truth win while it was still fresh, not buried, not lost 2 months of red tape, denial, or disappointment. But now, in a rainy night, at a forgotten gas station, justice had arrived in time. And somewhere deep inside her, a quiet vow took root, that this would not end with 2 officers being removed, that no human being should ever have to live their life apologizing just to exist, that what happened tonight would not disappear into silence. 3 a.m. The fluorescent lights in the emergency observation room glowed pale and sterile, casting a cold glare on the white ceiling and humming ventilation pipes overhead. The scent of disinfectant, plastic tubing, and the steady beep of heart monitors created a scene all too familiar to Monica. But this time, she wasn't the one in a mask, walking in with a patient's chart. This time, she was the one lying in the hospital bed. Across from her, Caleb slept a heavy, exhausted sleep after receiving bronchodilator treatment and an hour on an oxygen mask. He lay curled toward his mother, hands still wrapped tightly around his phone, the same device that had recorded every sound from the night before, like a black box preserving a nightmare. Monica couldn't sleep. She sat up in bed, back resting against a pillow, eyes locked on a fixed spot in the air. In her mind, the images played on repeat. Wallace swatting the phone from her hand, the inhaler being slapped from Caleb's grasp, Benson's smug, dismissive stare, each moment replayed in slow motion, frame by frame, etched deep into her memory like film burned into celluloid. She couldn't stop thinking. What would have happened if Nathaniel hadn't come in time? What if Caleb had lost consciousness? What if she hadn't reached the inhaler in time? A chill ran down her spine. But more than fear, what hurt most was the anger. Anger because she knew this wasn't rare. She was a nurse, she'd seen it too many times. Black patients, especially women, entering the hospital wounded in both body and spirit, yet constantly labeled combative, uncooperative, disruptive. She had always tried her best to heal them, but she never imagined that one day she would be the one clenching her jaw, holding her child, fighting to prove she was simply trying to survive. The door creaked open. Nathaniel stepped in quietly, still in his plain black shirt, a steaming cup of coffee in hand. His face held its usual calm, but beneath it, lines of worry hadn't faded. "How's Caleb?" he asked gently. "Better," Monica replied in a soft voice. "Doctors said we might be moved to a standard room in the morning, but he's showing signs of emotional trauma. They're recommending counseling." Nathaniel nodded. He handed her the coffee, then sat beside her bed. A minute passed in silence between the two siblings. Then Monica spoke, low but firm. "I don't want this to be another hot story that cools off in a week. I don't want people to be outraged for 3 days and then move on like this was just another headline in a long chain of injustice." Nathaniel looked at her for a long moment. There was no rebuttal in his eyes, only deep understanding. "I get it, and it won't be forgotten. Can you promise that?" Monica asked, doubt creeping into her voice. "You're the mayor, but you know how it works. The report will say it was a misunderstanding. The officers will be reassigned. The media will cover it for a week, and then people will scroll back to celebrity gossip. And me, I'll still be the black mother who was pinned to the side of her car, stripped of her right to protect her son." Nathaniel sighed deeply. "Monica, I can't change the whole world overnight, but I can start with this city, and I can start with the truth you hold." He gestured toward Caleb's phone, still gripped in the boy's hand. "That recording unedited, undeniable, no one can spin it. And you're a nurse, a mother, a citizen. You have every right to stand up and make them listen." Monica fell silent. She'd never seen herself as someone who had the right to lead anything. She'd been conditioned to endure, to keep her head down, to avoid trouble by sacrificing truth. But tonight, that barrier had shattered. She looked at Caleb sleeping beside her, his face still taut with stress. He was only 10, yet he already understood. Sometimes silence isn't the answer. The next morning, the city of Riverhill woke up to explosive news. Mayor Carter suspends 2 officers after confrontation with black nurse and her son. Social media erupted with hashtags, "Justice for Monica, protect black child, we can't breathe." A photograph of Monica cradling Caleb, bathed in the red light of the ambulance, taken by a bystander, had gone viral. Not because it was horrifying, but because it was undeniably real. On Twitter, a fellow doctor posted, she had just worked a 12-hour shift, still in uniform. "No one deserves to be treated like this, especially not with a child fighting to breathe." A single mother commented, "I am Monica. I've been asked, 'Are you sure that car is yours?' while picking up my kid. And I don't have a brother who's a mayor to show up in time." No one called Monica a victim. They called her a survivor, a mother who stood her ground. Monica watched the news quietly. Caleb sat beside her, hands still clasping hers. As the segment ended, he looked up at her and asked the question that made her heart stop. "Mom, are we bad people for recording the police?" Monica's chest tightened. She knelt down so she was eye level with him, placing her hands gently on his shoulders. "No, baby, you are brave. There are times when telling the truth is the only way to protect what's right. And sometimes it's the child who makes the world look again." Caleb nodded. He didn't fully understand yet, but he could feel something had shifted inside his mother, and inside himself. 3 days after the gas station incident, Monica stood before the glass doors of the press room at Riverhill City Hall. There were no TV cameras aimed at her, no crowd of reporters jostling for sound bites like at a political press conference. Just a long, white-lit room, a mahogany table, and people who hadn't come to record, they had come to listen. Monica wore a dark blue blouse. Her left arm was still lightly bandaged from the bruising that night. Her hair was neatly tied back, no makeup, but her eyes, steady and sharp, belonged to someone who had walked through fire and emerged clear-headed enough to tell the story. Beside her sat a civil rights attorney arranged by Nathaniel, a middle-aged woman named Clara Stone, with steel in her gaze and precision in her voice. Across the table sat representatives from Internal Affairs, the Sheriff's Office, the District Attorney's Office, and 3 members of the City Oversight Board. "We're not filming this," Clara said firmly at the start, "but this recording will serve as a legal statement, should this move toward formal prosecution." Monica nodded. She was ready, not because the fear had vanished, but because she could no longer live as if she didn't deserve to be heard. She began in a low, steady voice. She told them everything, from pulling into the gas station, the eerie silence of that night, to the way the 2 officers emerged from their vehicle. She detailed each condescending question, each smirk, each moment where the illusion of authority turned into a weapon meant to corner and diminish. "I made it clear I was a nurse. I showed my documents. I cooperated. But they weren't looking at my credentials. They were looking at my skin. They weren't searching for information. They were searching for a reason to harm." She paused, breathed deeply. Her eyes drifted toward Caleb, sitting quietly in the corner, clutching a cup of orange juice, his gaze steady, cutting through the room like headlights in fog. She went on. "I wasn't scared because I'm an adult. I was scared because my son was watching. And I didn't know if I could live with myself if he didn't survive that asthma attack." Clara reached for the audio recorder on the table. She placed Caleb's phone, the one that had captured it all, in the center. One press, a soft beep. Then the night came flooding back. Monica's voice asking for her papers. Wallace's smug chuckle. The sound of a phone hitting the pavement. Caleb's quiet, trembling voice. "Mom, I can't breathe." No one in the room blinked. The officials, the ones who had always assumed it takes 2 sides to cause a problem, now sat frozen, unable to explain away a truth so raw, so absolute. When Caleb's final cry echoed, "Mom, I can't breathe," an elderly man on the oversight board slowly set his pen down. He didn't write another word. He simply sat still, silenced by truth. When the recording ended, Clara turned to Monica. "Do you have anything else you'd like to add?" Monica looked up. She didn't glance at her notes. She met every eye in the room. "I'm not an incident. I'm a human being. My son isn't an exception. He's a symbol of countless other children, black, brown, who are treated like threats instead of being protected. I'm not here asking for pity. I'm here because I know if I stay silent, another mother will be dragged into darkness. And maybe next time, no one will arrive in time." The room fell into silence. But this time, it was the silence of reckoning. That afternoon, Monica and Caleb were invited to City Hall to meet privately with the city's communications advisor. Nathaniel wanted the incident to spark actual reform, not just a criminal case, but a policy movement focused on civil rights in law enforcement interactions. "You can say no," Nathaniel told her gently as they exited the hearing room. "I know you hate crowds. You can step away from all this now, and I'll handle the rest." Monica shook her head. "No, not this time. I can't let my child grow up in a world where survival depends on luck." What are you going to do?" She looked him dead in the eye, without blinking. "I'm going to tell the story, every detail, to the press, to schools, to people who don't believe, and to the ones who know but pretend they don't. Because my son didn't stay silent. And now it's my turn." That night, Monica wrote the first entry in a blog she titled, "To Breathe a Mother's Story." She wasn't a writer, she wasn't an activist, but every word she typed cut like a scalpel slicing open what society often called accidental injustice, exposing how people like her were expected to stay polite, patient, and calm even as they were pushed to the breaking point. The post ended with one simple paragraph. "My son never asked, 'Mom, why did they do this to us?' He only asked, 'Mom, did we do something wrong?' I write these words so that no child like mine ever has to ask that question again." The next morning, Monica woke to the constant buzzing of her phone messages, emails, missed calls, a digital flood pouring in just hours after she had clicked publish on the first post of her blog, "To Breathe a Mother's Story." She hadn't expected it to spread this fast. In less than 12 hours, the post had been shared over 300,000 times. On Twitter, Let Cala Breathe was trending nationwide. Every line she had written, steady, measured, but pulsing with restrained pain, had been reprinted in newspapers, quoted on podcasts, and reposted by groups who had rarely cared about racial injustice before. People weren't paying attention just because she was a victim. They were listening because her son had recorded the truth and because she, a single mother and a nurse, had dared to rise from that truth and speak. At the River Hill mayor's office, Nathaniel Carter stood in front of his computer screen, his hand gripping the edge of the desk as he read responses from the city's chief of police. There was tension, there was defensiveness, but there were also unexpected words from people who once wore the same uniform as Wallace and Benson. A senior officer had written, "I used to think I was one of the good guys, but when I heard that recording, I realized my silence in moments like these has helped enable the problem. We need to change," a young female officer shared. "I used to be a kid like Caleb. Now I wear the badge, and I know what it's like to be doubted just because of your skin. I stand with Monica." Nathaniel knew the dominoes had started falling, and this time, they weren't falling into despair, they were falling into responsibility. In a southern neighborhood of River Hill, where over 60% of the population was black or brown, a small meeting was held in a community room. Single mothers, night shift fathers, public school teachers, they gathered without microphones, without banners. On a projector screen, Caleb's recording was played again. When the sound of his wheezing echoed in that small space, no one cried, but their eyes heavy and hollow, pressed down like stone. A middle-aged woman spoke up. "My daughter was once handcuffed for bringing my purse to school. They said she stole it. No one ever apologized." A young man nodded. "I learned as a kid never to look cops in the eye. Not because I was afraid, but because even one look could be seen as provocation." No one in that room was famous, but each of them carried a scar. And when they heard Caleb say, "Mom, I can't breathe," they saw themselves. Caleb, the boy at the heart of it all, was the quietest of them. He didn't know that his mother's post had gone viral. He only noticed that grown-ups around them spoke more softly now, more respectfully. Even the school nurse asked if he was okay, not with pity, but with a kind of reserved admiration. Still, Caleb didn't feel comfortable. He didn't want to be a young hero. He just wanted to breathe, to do his homework, to live like any other kid. But deep down, he understood he had crossed a line most 10-year-olds never face. And now, there was no going back. That afternoon, the mother and son were invited to a panel hosted by River Hill University, titled "Justice, Children's Rights, and the Power of Community Response." At first, Monica declined, but Caleb, after a long silence, looked up and asked, "If we don't go, who's going to tell them what really happened?" The question stopped Monica cold. She realized her son had begun to grow up not through protest or demands, but through the quiet gravity of someone who had endured and survived. And so, they went. The panel wasn't held in a grand auditorium, just a circle of chairs, students, professors, parents, and a few uniformed officers assigned to listen. Monica spoke, not in rigid, chronological detail, but from emotion, as though every time she told the story, another layer of the wound began to close. "My son never asked why they did that to us," she said. "He only asked, 'Mom, did I do something wrong?' And that was the most painful part." The room fell silent. A young psychology professor turned on her mic. "I teach about trauma. But today, Caleb taught me something more important, that even a child, when pushed to the edge, can hold onto clarity and defend what's right." A law student stood. "I used to think justice starts in a courtroom, but now I realize it starts with the courage to press record." That night, before bed, Caleb asked, "What do we do next, Mom?" Monica smiled. "Nothing big. We just keep telling the story, one day at a time. Again and again, until no one dares stay silent anymore." Caleb nodded. He didn't need to be a hero. He just needed to be someone who didn't look away when the truth needed to be heard. On the morning of the hearing, a thin mist blanketed Riverhill, as if the whole city was holding its breath before a turning point that offered no way back. Monica wore a simple gray sweater beneath a long overcoat. Her hand held Caleb's not tight, not trembling, just a steady, quiet presence. Outside the city courthouse, there were no protest signs, no chants or megaphones, just ordinary people dressed in work clothes, nurse scrubs, school uniforms standing in neat lines, silently watching the mother and son walk in. They weren't there to make a scene, they were there to bear witness, to show they refused to look away. Inside the courtroom, every seat was filled, not because of the sensationalism of the case, but because of what it represented. This wasn't just a trial of two officers. It was a test of the justice system itself. At the defendant's table, Wallace and Benson sat with stone-cold expressions, shirts crisp, lawyers murmuring strategy beside them. But despite their upright posture, their eyes kept flicking toward Monica and Caleb as if the real power in the room wasn't held by the court, but by the two they had once tried to silence. Plaintiff attorney Clara Stone stood and opened with a sentence not loud, but piercing enough to freeze the entire courtroom. Today, you won't just hear how two men assaulted a woman and terrorized her son. Today, you'll hear how power, unchecked, becomes poison, and how a 10-year-old boy restored justice with a single recording. Monica's testimony was brief. She didn't need to recount everything. The audio and restored gas station footage spoke volumes. She simply said, "I'm a nurse. I've stood through shifts with patients gasping for breath, but I've never had to watch my own child be stripped of air by the very people meant to protect him. I couldn't call anyone and my phone was knocked away. I couldn't scream because, if I did, they'd say I was being aggressive. But Caleb pressed record, and I'm standing here because he wasn't afraid of the truth." When Clara asked her one final question, "What do you believe is the most important thing for this court to hear today?" Monica didn't look at the jury, she looked at Caleb, then said, "Never underestimate a child who knows when to stay silent and when to speak." Then the defense began its pushback. They painted Monica as stressed, emotionally reactive after a long shift. They hinted Caleb might have been coached to record, even suggesting the entire ordeal was exaggerated. One young defense attorney said, "There's no proof Officer Wallace intended harm. It may have simply been a reaction to the mother's refusal to cooperate." Clara Stone didn't argue. She just played a clip. The audio crackled to life, Wallace's voice, shouting, "Your son's faking it. You people think you're above the law." The sound of a slap, an inhaler hitting the ground. Caleb's voice, panicked, gasping, "Mom, I can't breathe." Monica sobbing, "Please, he can't breathe." The courtroom fell utterly silent. No one could argue with the sound of truth. Then came Caleb's voice. He hadn't been required to testify, but the court allowed him to speak voluntarily. He stood, wore a white shirt, black shoes, no microphone, no drama, just his gaze. "I'm not a hero. I pressed record because I was scared. But I knew if no one heard what happened, they'd blame my mom. I wasn't faking. I've had asthma since I was little. I know what it feels like when you're about to stop breathing. And that day I didn't think I'd survive. But Uncle Nathaniel came, and now I can speak. I just don't want other kids to have to record something just to be believed." He didn't cry, but adults in the courtroom did. Even uniformed officers in the back row, none of them raised their heads. At the end of the hearing, the judge called a 3-day recess to deliberate. Monica and Caleb left the courtroom under the silent gaze of dozens of onlookers, not out of curiosity, but respect. On the way home, Monica asked, "You okay, baby?" Caleb nodded, "I'm just tired." But later, the next morning, a photo of Caleb in court, calm expression, clutching the phone that had recorded it all, graced the cover of the American Witness. The headline read, "Silent at the right time, speaking at the right place. One boy did what a whole system once denied. Riverhill would never be the same." Public schools began implementing curriculum on children's rights in law enforcement encounters. The city's police chief formally announced the launch of a reform initiative called the Caleb Protocol, mandating all checkpoints to have audio-visual recording and health evaluations for minors involved in stops. At a small corner of the gas station where it had all begun, locals erected a wooden plaque carved with these words, "The place where a boy chose to record the truth," so that grown-ups would no longer have the excuse not to listen. Sentencing day. The city of River Hill held its breath, not because people doubted the verdict, but because they feared the system might once again protect itself outside the courthouse. It wasn't crowded like the first hearing, no national news vans, no helicopters overhead, but there was something different. People arrived aloud. Conversations, no jostling. They came as if attending a vigil, not to witness a fall, but to remember a rise. Inside the courtroom, Monica and Caleb sat in the front row. Caleb's hand held his mother's. No fear, no anxiety, just the calm of a child who had learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is not look away. The judge entered. A white woman in her 60s, known for her integrity. She didn't need to bang the gavel more than once. With just one look, the room fell silent. After careful consideration of all evidence, she said slowly, including the audio recordings, witness statements, and conduct in this courtroom, the court finds officers William Wallace and Nathan Benson guilty of the following charges: assault of a non-resistant civilian, abuse of authority under color of law, endangering the welfare of a minor, obstruction of constitutional rights. Wallace turned to Benson, face flushed red, lips trembling, but said nothing. They still wore neatly pressed shirts, but their eyes had changed, no longer filled with contempt, but with disbelief at the reality that no one was shielding them now. The judge continued, the actions of the defendants not only violated departmental ethics, they betrayed the public trust. The people believed the police would protect, not terrorize. And worst of all, they stripped a child of his sense of safety simply because he bore a face they did not want to believe was innocent. A silence pressed down across the courtroom like weight. Then came the sentence. William Wallace sentenced to 6 years in state prison, without parole. Nathan Benson sentenced to 4 years in prison, with 3 years of supervised release post-sentence. The gavel struck, and the system shook. Monica didn't cry, but Caleb turned to her and asked, "Is it over now, Mom?" She leaned down, touching her forehead to his. "No, sweetheart. One chapter has closed. But justice, that's a long road. And we've only just taken the first steps." After the trial, Monica was invited to speak at a small press briefing in City Hall's foyer. At first, she declined. But Caleb's quiet words changed her mind. "If you don't speak, Mom, someone else will tell our story wrong." So she stepped up to the podium. No cue cards, no rehearsed lines. She looked straight into the lenses, into the eyes of strangers who had never known her name. "I'm not here as a victim. I'm a mother who didn't stay silent. I'm a nurse who returned to work after being shoved to the pavement. I'm a black woman who isn't asking for pityingly fairness, the same fairness anyone else would expect." She paused, took a breath. "But more importantly, I am Caleb's mother, and Caleb saved me believing in what was right, even if it was just pressing record in silence. I'm not telling this story to stir sympathy. I'm telling it so that people like me don't have to survive anymore. We can finally live." After the press conference, Caleb became a new kind of symbol. Not a victim, a quiet force. A group of teachers integrated his audio recording into their civics lessons. A student law group invited Monica to deliver their keynote. And the city council officially voted to establish an independent civilian oversight board, named the Caleb Commission, so that every child would have a voice, even when grown-ups refused to listen. That night, Monica and Caleb returned home. On their doorknob, an envelope had been taped. No name on it. Inside was an old photo. Caleb at age 6, grinning next to a birthday cake with frosting that read, "My wish, I want to be safe." On the back of the photo was a handwritten note. Thank you for not letting that wish be forgotten. A mother like you. Monica pressed the photo to her chest, then turned to her son. You've done more than I ever imagined. Caleb hesitated, then asked, Mom, do you think one day people won't need to record things just to be believed? Monica didn't answer right away. She looked out the window, where the stars held steady in the sky, unmoving no matter how chaotic the world beneath them became. Maybe not yet, but because of kids like you that day is coming closer. Caleb nodded, eyes shining not with pride, but with hope. 3 months after the trial, the city of Riverhill held an unofficial memorial, not with parades. No loudspeakers, no flashing LED screens. Just a quiet Saturday afternoon in the small park behind City Hall, where people often came to read, stroll, or simply seek peace. On the neatly trimmed grass, a small bronze plaque had been placed. It read simply, for all those who were once forced into silence, and for the children who dared to press record. At the bottom, a single name was engraved, Caleb James Brooks, not as a victim, not as a hero, but as someone who lived truthfully in a moment when few dared to. Monica stood behind the line of people approaching the plaque. She didn't want to be the center of attention. She had never sought titles or praise. But as she watched a young mother crouch beside the inscription, her child licking a lollipop in hand, Monica felt a quiet certainty bloom in her chest, a belief that one day, memorials like this might no longer be necessary, because justice would no longer be rare but expected. Caleb sat nearby on a stone bench, hoodie pulled up, sketchbook open on his lap. He was drawing an image, a tiny voice recorder resting in the palm of a hand. Beneath the sketch, he had written, "The truth doesn't need to shout. It only needs not to be silenced." That same day, in a closed-door session at City Hall, the City Council passed a new ordinance called the Caleb Act, outlining all traffic stops must have functioning audio and video recording 24/7. Any incident involving minors must be overseen by the independent community representatives. And crucially, any intentional destruction of audio or video evidence in civil cases shall be treated as a criminal offense. The law wasn't a victory. It was a promise, a commitment that said, we've heard you, and we will no longer pretend we didn't. Even at just 10 years old, Caleb began receiving letters from across the country, students from other states thanking him, teachers calling him proof that a child can help rewrite history, and one law student who sent him a copy of the Constitution made easy, with a handwritten note, "One day, you'll write laws better than this." Caleb didn't enjoy crowds, but when asked if he wanted to visit the state capitol, he said, "I don't need to stand at the podium. I just want to see where laws are made so I know what I'm fighting for." As for Monica, she continued her nursing work at Riverhill General. But now, every time she entered a patient's room, they no longer just called her Nurse Monica. Some would whisper, "Are you the mom from the news? You're Caleb's mom, the one who recorded it." And Monica would simply smile, not denying, not confirming, because she knew the story no longer belonged to her alone. One evening, while Monica was chopping carrots for dinner, Caleb walked into the kitchen, sketchbook in hand. He placed it gently on the table and pointed to a new drawing. It showed two figures, a woman in a white nurse's coat holding a boy in a hoodie. Across the image were long cracks like a shattered mirror, but through the cracks, light poured in, dividing the darkness into fragments of brightness. Caleb said, "You know, Mom, I don't think everything broken is bad. Some cracks let the light in." Monica froze, gripping the knife. Then she turned, knelt, and wrapped her arms around her son. "You're right, baby. That's why we don't try to tape the cracks shut, we let the light through." A few weeks later, Monica was invited to be the keynote speaker at a national summit on community police reform. She stood beneath a soft spotlight, in front of hundreds of representatives, lawmakers, scholars, and civil rights advocates. But she didn't bring a speech. She didn't read from notes. She just told the story. "I'm not here to represent victims. I'm here to remind you, don't wait until a child has to do what grown-ups were supposed to do. My son didn't save me. He saved something in us, the part that listens, the part that remembers, the part that acts. She paused, her gaze sweeping the hall. I hope one day, when my son is grown, he'll live in a world where speaking up isn't an act of courage, but just the way things are. And the entire auditorium rose in a standing ovation, not out of pity, but because they knew the truth had survived not through force, but through memory and love. Over a year later, at a small local library, an 11-year-old boy stood before a shelf labeled Stories That Changed Society. He pulled down a slim book with a pale blue cover, titled The Little Recorder, The Story of Caleb and the Mother Who Wouldn't Back Down. Author Monica James Brooks. He opened to the first page, where a simple dedication was printed. For everyone who has ever had to hold their breath, you can breathe now and speak.